let's just do a quick audio check. You guys can hear me okay? Awesome. Okay, so tonight we are continuing on from last week's lesson where we started building out our CRUD API, and we were actually doing genres and movies as our two pieces. So the idea will be that when we're done is a genre can have many movies. So you're going to learn how to create associations using Mongoose, which is super easy to do. We're going to use the populate method that's built into Mongoose, which is super handy for being able to grab that data. So hopefully you'll like what we're about to do tonight. We're also going to finish off the two pieces that we had started. So I believe where we ended off is we could create a genre and we could read the genres. So I did have Hopscotch open earlier just to make sure that we could do both of those things. So here's my Hopscotch. If I click send, it does a quick fetch. Oh, I think I closed my, I closed my server. But we can go ahead and reopen that all right now. So why don't we do that? So we'll navigate to where we had started our lessons under our live folder here, right? Not Comp 1006. There we go, Comp 2068. We'll go into lesson 8. I'm going to right click and choose to open with code. So I have my code opened up. And I'm just going to leave these all open so we can quickly do a review. And then I'm going to right click and choose Git Bash here. And just dock that over to the left hand side with my code over here. And we don't need it to be quite that big. There we go. And then, I mean, why not start up our server, right? So I'll start up the server, npm run dev, which you'll remember is executing that script in our package.json file that we created, this one right here. And I think that's it. I think we're ready to go. So if I open up Mongo, sorry, not Mongo, but this thing, Hopscotch, and click send. Yep, sure enough, I can see my genres. And we should be able to create a genre as well if we do a post. And we just need the information here. So I believe we have name and action. So that must have been one of the things that we were about to do. If I click send, so I get a duplicate key error because there's obviously already a duplicate key. So why don't we add drama in? And there we go. We have a new genre created. And if I flip this back over to get and click send, you can see that we have our horror, thriller, action, and drama as our keys. So that reminds me, because I totally forgot about it, but that reminds me that we had made it so that the model automatically validated to see whether or not the users were entering in more than one of the same name, right? Because we're trying to make it unique. We want our genres to be nice and unique so that we don't wind up with genres with this duplicate data inside of it, right? Because that's not good. We want to make sure that they are completely nice and clean, and we've got singular atomic data in there so that when you do look up drama, there's not like two categories of drama listed to two different sets of movies, because that would be pretty terrible. In order to carry that forward, we should have some better validation inside our model that actually normalizes it. So it takes that data, and before it gets saved, it actually normalizes that data, making sure that, you know, we've converted it to lowercase, we've removed any trailing spaces or any weird symbols or anything. We just trim it up and make it just nice and tidy, and then we put it into our database, or attempt to, and that way we can guarantee that, you know, like an extra space at the end isn't what's causing it to be unique. Because if I go to Hopscotch right now and I do a post, so I've got drama here, but if I add a space at the end of it and click send, it creates it successfully, right? And if I add a space before it and hit send, see, now it's done it twice. So now I've got 3 versions of genre in here, right? So I've got horror, thriller, action, drama, drama, drama. And the reason why they're different is because of the spaces, and computers are super literal, right? Something that I seem to always have to explain to new programming students is that a computer does not know that there is a name with a capital letter versus a name with a lowercase letter are not the same thing. Or, sorry, are the same thing in your world. They mean the same thing. You know, Sean with a capital S versus Sean with a lowercase s means exactly the same thing. But to computers, that's not true, because they're very literal. They take everything as meaning one-to-one, or not, sorry, one-to-one. So if you have a capital S on the name Sean, for example, and you're comparing to a lowercase Sean, it won't match, because the binary interpretation of both of those is different, right? So you need to understand that computers are super literal. They are not just going to kind of guess what you're trying to get at. So that's why drama with a space or drama with 2 spaces is different than drama with no spaces, and we wind up with 3 dramas. So we'll have to clean that up after, but just keep that in mind. So we can actually write a model method that actually does that automatically for us. Before it saves, it will clean up that information before we save. But we'll do that in a minute. I have one more housekeeping thing to do before we actually get into that. And that is talking about our lab, Appies and Nappies. So there's a new lab, right? We actually have one more to do after this. Then we've done all of our labs. We're supposed to have 2 quizzes as well. I will try to get the other quiz out too before the break. Our project 2 I'm putting together, because the project 2 originally I had was taking the React portion and connecting it to the Node portion, which is not really feasible based on the time that we have. So instead, I'm just going to give you a API. You're just going to create an API based on the same ideas of what we've done so far, and then that will be your project 2. But anyways, I will release that likely later in the week, and then I'll post it, but we'll talk about it on Monday of next week. However, Lab 2. So you're going to use the last lesson as a reference. So once we're done tonight, you will have a full set, but you can start with what you learned last week. You're going to add 2 following routes. You're going to add people, which will return an array of 4 people objects. Each object has a unique ID, their name, age, and one other attribute of your choosing. And then a people ID, which will return a person with the past ID. Oh, I just realized something. This is the wrong lab altogether. This is not the one based on the CRUD API. It's missing the models and stuff. You know what? Hold off on that. Don't do that yet. Can I change? I don't want to change the due date. I want to change the visibility. Shoo. There you go. Now you can't do anything with it yet. Alright, I'll have to actually take a look at that. That's not the right lab. I'll fix that on the break. That is totally the incorrect lab. The lab you guys are going to do is to take the API that we just built, and you're going to add your own resources to it, essentially. You're going to add a new resource to it, and then I'll trigger that resource, and everything will be hunky-dory. Anyways, that's basically what it will be. It's like 5 minutes. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at what we did last week. So we set up our application. We created a very basic set of controller for genres, and we created a model so that we can actually start working with our data. So the models are brand new to us, right? We haven't worked with models before. Models are being provided by the library called Mongoose, which is our way of being able to connect to Mongo. And then it provides a feature set so that we can actually create models that contain things like validation, sanitization, normalization. It creates constraints for us so that we can actually force data typing, right? So, you know, it has to be a string value. It is required. It has to be unique. Drop any duplicates if you find any. So this is our constraint on the name field for our genre, right? So we can actually control what somebody enters as data inside that particular field. Because Mongo itself is super open. It doesn't care what you enter into it. It will store anything you want. Data typing isn't really there. It doesn't really matter to it. Well, data typing is. I shouldn't say that. Data typing slightly is. Once you have declared a field, and then you started storing data into it, it assumes that all data based on that field will be the same type. So there is that constraint, but you can add as many fields as you want. They are not required by default in Mongo. They're super loose that way. Unique and drop dupes, like they do have a unique thing built into Mongo that you can activate. But I mean, Mongoose just makes working with the Mongo database simpler because you don't need to learn a new query language. It's a very basic query language to work with. It takes nothing to pick it up. So this defines the schema. This thing here defines a blueprint of our model. It basically describes what the data is going to look like that we're putting inside our database. This timestamps option that we're using here is super important because it actually gives us created at and updated at timestamps, which allows us to be able to create kind of like a small, very basic audit trail of data going into our database in case we want to know when something was created, right? Or when last it was activated or checked or whatever. So once we had our model, our next step is always our controllers. And so this is slightly different than the controller we had created the week before. We're pulling in our model, we're assigning it to a constant called genre. And now we can actually call the query methods that are available on that model. So the models give us some cool query methods. We have .find, which will actually return back a set of records based on a condition, but if you don't give it a condition, it will just give you back all of the records, or documents I should say, all of the documents for the genre collection. They all get returned. Once we have that, we create a response, right? And we set a status of whatever status code we want, and then we return it as JSON, right? And it's cool because our Mongo database works in JSON. So we get our data back in JSON, we can return it to our responder or our client requester in JSON. Everything we're working with is JavaScript, which is what JSON is built on. So it's JavaScript, JavaScript, JavaScript. Everything we're doing right now is JavaScript, 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 which is great because then you only need to know one language. With our create, it's a little bit more elaborate. We grab the name field from our request body, so we have to make sure whatever the body is that's being passed to our application has a name property in it. We extract that, and then we create our first genre, or we create a genre, right? And it's simple as just calling genre.create. This await goes in tandem with async. Async and await is a very cool, easy to use, handy feature set of ES6 that allows us to be able to wait for a asynchronous operation to finish before we move on. So this is cool. So we actually completely encapsulate the asynchronous operation just by using the await command. So once this is finished, because it is an IO, once it's finished, then we can go ahead and respond with our JSON to whoever is making this request. So we have our two methods so far. We have index and create. We do need update and we do need delete so that we can actually modify those certain pieces of data. We also need show, right? We want to be able to look up a genre by its ID. That would be really handy to be able to grab a genre by its ID. Actually, because the genres are unique, it would also be handy if we could just grab a genre set by its genre, right? Like, so we can look up drama and pull back the drama set because eventually we're going to connect all the movies to it. So it kind of makes sense to be able to grab all the movies by that genre set. But I mean, there's tons of ways to do that. So right now, why don't we keep it simple? We will create a show. So show is going to be very basic. So let's create it between index and create here. And we'll just call it show. And again, it's async, right? So we'll have the request, response, and next. And this time request is actually going to provide us with some information that we're going to need. Okay. Once you have that built out, make sure you add in your try and catch, just like we did last week. And the catch is simple. It's just going to do next error, right? Because then that will send it off to our error handler. So just like with index, we do need to find the specific record. So we're going to do const genre, so just one word, right? So singular, because we're only pulling back one genre, equals await genre dot find. I think it's find one, or you can find by ID. Let me double check my notes because I know they deprecate these stupid methods every so often, and I forget, and then I teach you the wrong thing. I think show does. Oh yeah, find by ID is still valid. Find by ID, And with that, we're going to give it the identifier. So why don't we extract that from the message first? So we'll grab that from request.body. And we'll make sure we pass that parameter in Hopscotch. And then we'll just give this the ID, like so. And then obviously the last little bit is just responding with a status of 200.json genre. Nice and simple. Very, very easy to write these little action methods. What a valid post request looks like for create. Yep, I can in Hopscotch. Here, I'll give you this first before we do that. So this is going into controllers, genres, .js. You want to see the raw post? It's tricky to get it from here, only because the request object that Node creates is so massive. It's this huge. If you just want to see the data that it's returning, I can show you that, like the request body. Or do you want to see the whole payload? Yeah, literally what you just wrote is the payload. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, what you just wrote is exactly what happens. So basically what happens is body parser, which is that library that we used, it takes the payload and it kind of converts it a little bit. It converts it into a JSON object from the format that it comes in. You have an issue? What's the issue you're having? Whoa, that's more than my chat window holds. Hold on. Genre validation failed. Path name is required. So what that's telling you is that the name field that you're transmitting is not there. Yeah, that should work though. So in your model, if you look at your model, Leo, your model should look like this. You should have a field called name. Oh, is that your post request? Name. Name from request body. Did you check and console log what name's value is? Are you actually getting name from the request body? Does it contain the value of what you're expecting it to be? Yeah, no worries. I would start with console logging name. Yeah, no worries. All right, so yeah, so in our controller here, we have our show action. So let's now see if it works. I did paste it in the chat. Hopefully you can still access it there. If not, I'll just paste it again. There you go. And I'm going to jump over to Hopscotch. And we're going to see if it works. So I need to first get the genres because I need an ID, right? So it doesn't matter which ID I use. I'll use action. So I'm going to double click on the ID here and hit Control C. And then I'm going to send a GET request. But I'm going to add a parameter, and this is not going to work. I just realized it is definitely not going to work. So we're going to give it ID and then the value. Oh, geez, I'm doing this whole thing wrong. Hold on. Nope, sorry, we need to do slash after the genres with the ID. So it's genres slash and that number. And if I hit send, it's going to say 404 because what am I missing? I have my controller action, but I am missing something else. Something very important. Yeah, I'm missing the route. So we need to create a route that basically captures this identity for us based on our path. So that's quite easy for us to do. Inside our genres, we just need to go to our genres routes, and we should bring in the show operation. I like to keep these in order though, so we'll do show there. And then right after here, we'll do router.get /genres /:ID. And what that will do is act kind of like a bound parameter, and it will store the value in the request params. So we will have to make a modification to our controller as well. So that will load show. So that's in our routes genres file. And you're going to add that in there. Okay. In the controller, we just need to make a slight change. Right now, we're trying to grab this ID from the request.body, but that's only for post requests. We actually need to grab it from request.params. Request.params will contain the value of the ID for us, and we can use that in order to do our search. I think we talked about this once before already. I think we did it in the first time we started looking at APIs. So request.body is for post bodies. Request.params is for like query strings, essentially. So once you have that done, you should be able to flip over to Hopscotch, try the same send, and it should return a record for you. So I get back action now. If I take that off and just do a get request, I'll get back all of them. So I only want Thriller, so I'll copy that and I'll post it at the end like so. I'll give you an example of the route just in case you're having difficulty seeing it. That's the example of the route. So we have index, we have show, and we have create. The two that we are missing are update and delete. We need both of those, right? Because update and delete will allow us to actually modify our genre, and delete will allow us to remove the genre once we're done with it, right? So now we don't generally use, actually, you know what? I won't jump ahead. We'll talk about update first. So update is kind of like, it's kind of important to understand that these tend to be a combination of things. So update is a bit of a combination of show and create, because we need to look up the record first to make sure it exists, and then if it does, then we go ahead and create it. So that's kind of the way update works. Oh no, right, this is Mongoose, so it does that automatically. Sorry, I'm thinking of PHP. My apologies. We only need to call the nice, cool find one and update method, which does that automatically for us. So we're going to do an async request, response, and next. I was missing content type header. Oh, okay. Oh, are you sending like your own curl request? What are you doing? Oh, okay. Yeah. I've never used that. I've used Insomnia and stuff and Postman and things like that, but yeah. I've never used the burp suite. I'll have to look at it. But yeah, the content type kind of is super important, because otherwise it doesn't, I think it defaults to text plain. Isn't that the default? If you don't provide a content type? I'm pretty sure the default is text plain. Which, I mean, you could have still handled, because you could have just converted it into JSON. But then you wouldn't have gotten the really, you know, you shouldn't have to do that. Sending the content type is to avoid that. Yeah, you didn't have the content type header, but even then, it should have still created one automatically. I think there's like a default one when you do an HTTP request, you automatically get a content type regardless. Like there's a default one. Oh, you have to manually set it. No black magic. Not like the browser, eh? All right. Let's do our try, catch, grab our error, right? Do our fancy click inside the bracket, hold Alt, click inside the other bracket, so we get two cursors, hit Enter to split them apart. Then we're going to do next error. Not this error, the next error. So once again, just like we did in, not create, well actually in create as well, but more in show, we're going to need the ID so we know which particular record we're updating. Now, there's two ways we could do that. Either we could grab it from the params, right? So they could submit it through the params, and then we could create a route that points to that. But that's not usually the way updates are done. You don't generally grab the ID from your parameter list. You would grab it from your body, right? So if you think about the way a form would be created, you would have a hidden field with the ID inside the hidden field, and then you would pull the ID from that. So we're going to kind of follow that methodology where the ID that you want to update gets passed as part of your post request. So that's pretty simple. All we have to do is do a const. We're going to grab the ID and the name, right? Because we'll grab all the fields, and we'll get that from the request body. Did we return, like in create, do we actually return the record? Yes, we do. We kind of return this weird message body. We're going to do the same thing. So we'll grab the genre that it updates. Actually, I don't know if this returns that genre. Well, I guess we're going to find out. So we're going to do await genre dot find one and update. Isn't that a mouthful like of stuff? So first we give it the where clause. That's the first part. So it takes two arguments. The first is the where clause. So we're going to search by ID. And we'll pass it our ID. And then the second is the data you want to write. So we're going to write name, and we don't need to write name because that's just silly. So the first is the where clause, the second is the ID you want to write. Then when you're done, you can go ahead and do your response with your status of 200 and return back the JSON, and we'll do it in the same way we did up here, right? We'll give a message of genre was updated successfully. A status of success, and then the new genre, or sorry, the updated genre, I should say. So this would be our entire update command. So walk you through this one more time. We're grabbing the ID and the name, which means they need to provide that as part of their post request, right? The post body will have to contain the ID that you want to modify and the name of the genre as well that you want to change, right? Because that's the only field that we're changing. We go ahead and we find one and we update. So the first argument of find one and update is the clause. So this doesn't have to be ID colon ID. It can literally be anything. As long as it's a record, right? Like you could search by the name field if you wanted to, and then we tell it to update with the new name. So if the name is the same, then essentially you're just replacing it with that name. It's not one of those things where it checks it and then just dumps it if it already exists. It will actually modify it. So just keep that in mind because it's kind of important to understand, especially if you're trying to keep your updates purified and you don't want to perform an update if the name is the same. You would need to deal with that inside your model. You would need to find a way to kind of interpret it and say, hey, do you already exist? You already exist, and then dump it. And then the genre is updated successfully. This is just our response, which you guys should be used to by this point. Now we're ready actually to run our Hopscotch. So let's try. So obviously this is a post request, which is not going to work. Why do I keep forgetting about routes? I don't know what my deal is tonight. I just keep forgetting about routes. We need to go to genres routes and create a new route. So we'll import the update method, and then we'll create a new router.post genres and update. Now this is not clean by any means. This is kind of gross. The clean way to do this would be not use post, but use put, which we could do. I mean, it technically supports it. But the problem is if you were to connect a client to it, you would need to use Ajax. You would almost have to, because the browser doesn't natively support all of the HTTP methods. It only supports get and post, most browsers. So you would have to use Ajax if you wanted to be able to use put and delete and those type of things. I mean, we could be very cheeky, and we could do two. There we go. So now we're using the HTTP method put. See, this is why I love only teaching one section of a class, because then I can kind of go off the rail a little bit. So now we're using get, which is what you want to do for these two. Post, which is what you want to do for create, and we're supporting anybody who's using our API from a browser, or any application that only supports get and post. But then we're also supporting better RESTful routing, because we're actually using the proper HTTP request, which would be put. So we're supporting both. Now I'm pretty sure Hopscotch actually supports everything. So let's see if this works. So we'll do a put just to see if it works, and then we'll do the other one just to make sure. So actually the put, hold on, sorry, I'm screwing myself up here. The put doesn't require the update, right? Because we know it's an update. We absolutely know it's an update, so we don't need to put to genres update. Putting is automatically update. Post is automatically create. So if we put to genres, then we know it's an update, so it should trigger this path. See how much cleaner that routing is? Like if you didn't have this route, see how much cleaner that is? Because our HTTP method is stating what our actions are. All right, let's go back to Hopscotch here. I imagine you guys don't get as excited as I do about this stuff. Like, dude really lives for this thing. All right, first thing I want to do is I'm going to update Thriller. And I'll copy the ID because we need that. So I'm going to add a new field called ID. And I'm going to paste the ID into the field. Because remember, it has to be a part of our body, right? The routes? Yep. Oh yeah, I guess you're slightly behind. Routes. Genres.js. There's the routes. Okay, so I'll jump back to Hopscotch here. So I've got my put. I'm pointing to the genres using put. I've got my name. I don't want to call it drama though. Why don't we call it psycho thriller? There we go. It's a psycho thriller. It's a different genre. And then we should be able to hit send and it should work. Yes, it worked. Genre was updated successfully. Nice, eh? And that's using put. So if I wanted to try the post one, so we can do post, and this will be update as well, and we'll just return it back to Thriller. So this time I'm posting and I'm activating that path, that route. This is for anybody who can't support those other types of methods. I'm going to click send, and sure enough, it updated correctly as well. Notice though that the record it returns is not the updated record, but rather the previous record, right? So we're not getting the updated record, we're getting the previous record, which is kind of interesting because I guess it follows in the order that it's saying it is. Find one and update. So that's exactly what it did. It found one and returned it and then updated it in memory. So we're not actually getting the record we need as the one that was previously updated. So we could do a get, right, and go grab that ID, and you'll see that it does say Thriller now. See, it says Thriller. But it would be nice if the record that we were getting returned to us in the update statement was actually the correct record. And the only way I can think of doing that, based on my current knowledge of Mongoose, is to actually fire this off, then retrieve the record and send it back. That would be the only... So essentially kind of a two-state thing. So we'd take this off, like so. Paste this here, and then we would just do a simple genre.find, or by ID, I mean, and then pass the ID like so. And then that would get returned instead, which, I mean, is perfectly valid. That makes sense to me. I just don't like running two queries if it's not necessary. Let's do a put. So we've got everything in here. We'll change this back to Psycho Thriller. And if everything works, it should just return Psycho Thriller down here. Ooh, converting circular JSON to JSON. I did something goofy. What did I do? Oh, because I didn't add my await. Need the await because the await what happens actually is it returns a promise. So when you get that error, it's likely you forgot to add await because it's returning a promise, and then it's converting JSON to JSON to JSON to JSON to JSON. It just keeps doing it, and you wind up with a big circular JSON thing. It's kind of goofy, but let's try it again. Send. See? And now it works. Now we're getting the proper record in return, right? Psycho Thriller. So, yeah, there must be a better way to do this so that it actually returns the correct record once it's done the update, but I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's just update 1. Maybe update 1 would just return the correct record. Oh well, we don't want to go down the rabbit hole. Too easy to go down the rabbit hole. So that's destroy. Our next one that we want to do is... No, sorry, that's update. The next one we want to do is destroy. So let's do destroy. Destroy is so simple. It's only 8 lines, 9 lines. And just like, it works very functionally, just like update does. You can almost copy update, actually, because it's basically the same. In fact, it is the same. Looking at it right now in my notes, it's identical. So let's just do that. So grab this code here from update and copy it. Come down to destroy and replace it, and then just change this statement here because it's find one and delete. Now the thing is though, is if you delete and then all of a sudden you try to search for it, obviously it's going to throw an error because you're not going to find it, right? We just deleted it. So we need to actually get rid of that, and we could, if you wanted to, we could return the deleted record. I don't know, does that seem weird to you? Like, would you return the deleted record? Or would you just return, hey, genre was deleted successfully? I think you would just return genre was deleted successfully with no record. Because it might confuse them thinking that the data was still there. I don't know, I'm kind of two minds on that one. Not sure what the best semantics would be for that. Yeah, just success or failure. Yep. I kind of think that's same with create and update as well. And I've seen that before where in creates they won't return the record. My only issue with that is that I might want that ID. And I don't necessarily want to do another call, like another API call, just to get the ID back. So I don't know, like it's kind of, again, two minds, like whether or not you return the actual record back when they create and when they update or not. Yeah, exactly, that is true. Like, why would you need that for delete unless your reasoning for delete is maybe you had a post-back hook system where once it does the delete, it sends the message back. In that scenario, you would definitely want the ID because you've created a disconnect from when your original request happened and when you actually go to remove the record. Yeah, exactly. It just depends on whether you're using like a hook-based system or you're doing polling. In this one, we're kind of assuming polling, right? Because this whole process is like you couldn't do this system without polling. So what polling is, for those of you that don't know, essentially is I'm going to make a request to this endpoint to destroy a record, and then I'm going to keep making the same request till you give me a response. Usually what happens, though, is the poll just holds. So I'm going to make the request, and we're going to hold this connection between us until you respond. Some systems don't allow you to do that. You make the request, and then you have to repeatedly ask whether or not the request is finished. That's polling. And then there's hookback systems, which is the way the internet is kind of going, which is where you make the request, your connection is terminated, and then you provide a post-back response endpoint where they actually post their response back to your server. So a lot of systems work that way because then nobody's waiting for anybody, right? It's just, it happens when it happens, and then once the post-back comes in, you deal with it. So in the polling situation, you likely wouldn't need the ID back because you would be requesting with that ID. And in the post-back situation, you would need the ID back because it's very likely you've lost that context and you need to regain it. So yeah, like Leo says, ultimately depends on what your requirements are. So let's try the destroy. I mean, we have so many drama. We have so much drama. There's just so much drama in this class. Oh, we can't do it yet. First, let me give you the action, and then we'll create the route. There you go. So we're going to need the route because we obviously already don't have it. And this is where we can do two routes again. We can do router.post. I mean, it's super boring, but that's what we can do. Genres/destroy. And we'll point that to the destroy action, which we should include. Does anybody know why I'm using the word destroy instead of delete? Why am I using destroy instead of delete? Cannot recover? No. No, it has more something to do with JavaScript and the word. No, not just semantics. No. Has to do with the actual word itself and then JavaScript. Yeah, that's my whole reasoning. If I was going to do that, Nick, I'd just call it terminate. So delete is a keyword in JavaScript. So if I call delete, like so if I say I had a delete method and I type in delete, delete is an actual keyword in JavaScript. It's for deleting object properties, right, and values. And if I just call it, it's going to cause a conflict and then it will blow up. So I have to use destroy in order to combat that. And it's like that in many different frameworks, and you're going to find that out as you start encountering MVC frameworks. They all have their little things, right? Like, so for example, in PHP, the word new is a keyword. So you can't just call new, right? So you can't be like function new. You're not allowed to do that because new is a keyword. So instead, you have to get creative and you have to use things like insert, right? So a lot of the model view controller systems, they don't use new. They either use create or insert to do that operation. In JavaScript, we can do new. That's totally fine. We just can't do .new. In Ruby on Rails, it's the same idea. You can't do new or you can do new. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. But I think you can do new because, again, the new command comes after. So it's totally fine. But yeah, the whole reason we can't use delete is because delete is a keyword. So these are our paths, our 5 paths. I'm using post here as just a fallback. I mean, we're creating the API. We don't necessarily need to have the post as the fallback. We could get rid of that for our own peace of mind. You just won't be able to connect from your... You know what? We're doing React and JavaScript anyways. I'm getting rid of these. Let's do this properly. Let's do this as a proper RESTful API. I'll give you this block. I mean, this isn't college, this is university. Let's do things properly. There we go. So that makes sense. It's contextually clear on exactly what each of these routes are doing. Post creates, put, delete, or updates, delete, deletes, right? It destroys. Very crystal clear on what these things are doing. Oh, I love the cleanliness of that. Absolutely love the cleanliness of that. All right, let's go to Hopscotch. And we're going to delete some things. So first of all, let's do a get and grab all of our genres. And I want to get rid of some of these dramas that I created. I just want to get rid of the drama. Let's get rid of the drama. So I'm going to change this to delete. And then I'm going to change my ID to this ID. And it doesn't matter if this is in here. Oh, we have one issue. I just thought of it. Inside our delete method in the controllers, we're grabbing the name. We don't need that. We're not using it anywhere, and we sure as heck are not creating anything. So this is the statement of find one and delete. We don't want to accidentally pass in name. I have no idea what it would do. It would probably just blow up. So this is the proper controller. So we're removing the name from our constant here, where we're getting it from the request body. And we're removing the second argument from find one and delete. We only need the one argument. Okay? So I'll give you that updated version of that controller action. So this is the updated version of the controller action. And then I'll jump back to Hopscotch. I get that. Jump back to Hopscotch. And then we'll go ahead and delete this thing. Genre was deleted successfully. Nice. So if we do a get request. Yep, we're missing one of the dramas. Let's purge some more drama here. Out with the drama. Do a delete request. Replace that value. Click send. Genre was deleted successfully. Do a get. Send. And there we go. We only have the one drama. So just a little bit of drama. So that's cool. We have completely created our genres controller. We have our update methods. Let's go through the methods we have. We have our index method, right? All it does is grab all of the data from the database and return it for us, right? All the documents currently in the genres collection. Let's use the proper terminology. In show, we're reaching out to the genres collection and we're looking for one genre based on the identifier that it has. As long as we find that, we respond with it. In our create action, we are reaching out to genres and we're attempting to create a new genre with this name. As long as it doesn't exist, it won't fail, we're good to go. Otherwise, we get a duplicate error. In this one, we're reaching out to our genres database, right? We're trying to attempt to update a document in the genre collection that matches this ID. And once we find it, we're going to replace the name field with whatever the value is currently in name, right? Once that happens, we go ahead and grab that genre again and save it in a genre variable and return that back for the end user. Oh, I clicked. Sometimes I click the outside layer and I forget. There we go. And then in destroy, we're grabbing the ID from the request body, reach out to our genre collection, find one of those documents by its ID, and delete it. Once it's deleted, we go ahead and respond with just saying, hey, this was deleted successfully. All is hunky-dory. Move on. So obviously these 5 actions require 5 routes. So in our routes, we have created our 5 routes. The get routes do exactly that. They just get data. That's their only purpose. They are read-only methods, right? They get the data from the endpoint and return it back to whoever made the request. Our post, put, and delete are mutated routes, right? They're mutable routes which cause mutations upon our documents, either by creating new documents in our collection, updating documents in our collection, or removing documents in our collection. So these are destructive. Even though they don't all destroy, they are still considered destructive, right? Because they do modify the end source. All right, cool. So any questions about any of those? No? All right, so why don't we take a 10-minute break? Why don't we come back at 3:05? We'll come back at 3:05, and then we'll dive into just inside genres. We're going to add in a thing to basically check to see, sanitize this name field so that we can exclude, basically exclude spaces and stuff like that. So that's what we'll do when we come back after the break. So let's take a break to 4:05. All right? Cool. All right, I guess we'll start back up again. Okay, so cool. I found some notes that show us how to actually do the duplicate check as a validation. So we'll implement that duplicate check in our validation, as well as clean up our strings, right, that we're adding to make sure that there's no spaces, there's no whatever, right? So here's how we're going to do that. We're going to take our genres that people are entering and basically turn them into, you know, a readable, like a proper readable string, extracting any just unnecessary stuff, right? So the way we do that is we can actually define, I'm in the models right now, under models genre.js, we can actually create something called a setter. The setter is a function that we want to execute whenever anybody actually adds new data to our database or to our record, right? If this happens before the actual record gets saved or before the validation, so there's a life cycle to how this all works. When we assign the values to, like when we take our create function and we put our values in there, this setter gets called the second the values hit it. Once we await for that transaction to happen, then the validation happens. So it's kind of important to understand that the set will happen first, then the validations will happen. Just keep that in mind. All right, so for our set, we're just going to take exactly the pieces we need. We're going to take the, oh, my brain just completely quit all of a sudden. I just had it on the tip of my tongue and then I forgot it. Let me make sure I'm not getting this wrong. Yes, no, I'm right. All right, so we're going to take the value that gets passed, and we're going to use an arrow function here. And then we're just going to call a string of operations on this value so that it all gets properly handled. So the first thing I want to do is kind of convert it all to lowercase, but before I do that, why don't we trim it? So trim it will remove white space before and white space after, so that's super important. Why don't we do a replace? And in our replace, we'll add a little bit of regex, and all we're going to look for is any S plus, meaning that there's multiple S's, like multiple spaces, and all we're going to redo is replace them with a single space. So if we find any spaces, we'll replace them with a single space, and then we'll call to lowercase on the whole works. So what that's going to do is it's going to take our value, and then we are going to trim it, which will remove leading and trailing spaces. We're going to replace, we are going to replace any double spaces we find or any contiguous spaces. So if you find like 3 spaces in a row, and we're going to replace it with a singular space, right? And then we're going to define the whole thing to lowercase afterwards. We could go even further and remove like symbols and normalize it even further, but I think this is good enough. So let's see what happens, because that should take care of the issue that if they add drama more than one time, it won't allow them to add drama more than one time. So let's go here and we'll do a post. Actually, first let's do a send so that we can get all of them back so I know what I'm dealing with here. Alright, we're going to do a post. So we have drama, right? And I'm going to add some more drama. Going to add some drama. Some drama, drama. There we go. Space, space, drama, space, space. See? Lots of spaces, right? If our thing works correctly, the spaces should be removed. It should save and throw a validation error saying it's a duplicate. Duplicate error. Yeah, yes. I just high-fived myself in case you were wondering what that noise was. Yeah, yes. All right. Let's check and see if it does other things, right? So what if I say our genre is emo, space, 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 punk, space, 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 pop, fun. So super crazy genre. So in all theory, all these extra spaces should get replaced with a singular space. We can actually also capitalize some of these. Let's capitalize some of these. Right? There we go. And the capitals should get replaced with lowercase letters. So if we send, so it's created successfully, and you'll notice it's all lowercase. All the excess spaces have been replaced with singular spaces. And we've basically essentially normalized everything we're seeing, right? So it's all nicely normalized now. So that's cool, so that we can't actually create duplicate entries using spaces and stuff. But I do kind of want to show you the validator function. So this is kind of overkill because we don't really need it, to be honest, because the drop dupes and unique kind of takes care of validation issues and we get that nasty validation error. But the nasty validation error is kind of a problem because it's really scary for a user of our API to receive this really nasty validation error. So we're going to try to create a proper validator here. So here's our validate, which is an array. And we're going to give it an object. Inside the object, we're going to have some properties. And the reason why it takes an array is because you can have multiple validations happen. So this is an async function, like so. And it's going to get a value. So that was the same as last week. So the thing that was wrong, though, is that I had an issue where where when I went to attempt to check against everything, it wasn't working, and that was a problem. We don't want that to happen. Why do I have if value equals this email return true? And what is that under? That is under email. Oh, I remember why. So we have to do this. This makes sense, actually, now that I look at it. This dot name return true. Why do you think we have to add this line for our validation? I want to see if you can kind of follow that logic to understand why we would need to add that line. Remember, validations happen regardless of what you're doing. So any mutable action you're doing will fire off the validator. So why do you think we need to add that line? I'll give you a hint. Yeah, nope. Nope, that would be redundant, right? We don't need to make sure the value in this name is the same. They will be, value will be the value of whatever it's supposed to be. It has more to do with what this is going on with this. I'll give you a hint. Name, when we create, is empty. It doesn't actually contain a value. When we create, it's empty. So this would be false, right? Nope. All right. When we update, we don't need to execute all of the logic again, right? When we update, we want to just make sure that these two things are the same. If these are the same during our update, there is no reason to execute our validation. So if they update by entering in drama again, and we don't need to waste our time, this just gives us a clean exit because obviously the value they've set it with already matches the record's current name. However, when we create, this .name will be undefined, which means value won't match it. So this is where we're actually going to perform the validation. So we'll just do a count. And then this is how we access it from the model. So it's this.model, which I forgot about. The name of the model, which will be genre. And then there's a cool function built into Mongoose called count documents. Every time I hear that, I think of Count Chocula. And we're going to look at name and the value of name, which will be value. And then all we need to do, we can kind of take advantage of the fact that 0 in JavaScript is also false. Like it's technically a falsy value. So we can actually put a bang operator in front of it and just do count. As kind of gross as that kind of is, we can take advantage of that. So if this is 0, which is false, and then we put a bang operator in it, it makes it, it turns it into its trueness, right? So the way the validator works is if you return true, it's valid. I can't remember. I forget. I think it's if you return true, it's valid. And if you return false, I could have that backwards though. If you return true, it might be invalid. We'll see in a second. We'll just make sure it works. And then we can create our props. And the props.value, as I explained last time, props is like all the properties that are available to you at the time, which is, I don't know why it's different for message than it is for the async function, but for the validator, but it is. So it exists. Please try a different genre name. There. So that's one heck of a validate function. So the idea is if we're creating a brand new genre and it doesn't already exist in our database, then this should never execute. This validation function should never execute. Sorry, this validation function. If we're updating and we didn't actually modify the value, it should just automatically return true. However, if we have a value and say it's 0, then we can return this value with the bang operator in front of it. I'm kind of curious if that works because to me, bang 0 would be true, not false. But I could be wrong. Why don't we take a look? See, this is where the handy little sidebar console window comes in really super handy. We'll zoom in. So let's see. If you do 0 equals false, that's true, right? But if I do bang 0, yeah, it's true. Why would I want to return true? I'm assuming I'd want to return false. So it would be bang bang count. And that would return false. So it'd be bang bang 0, which is false. Yeah. I've seen that before in different code bases. Bang bang zeros, but you know what I'm going to return? Count does not equal 0. That's what I'm going to return. So if it equals 0, it will return back false. No, true. False. Yeah, no, true. No, false. Never mind. Let's try this. See if it works. God, I need more sleep. Alright, so we're going to post the genres. We have the emo punk pop fun, which we've already put in the database. So if I hit send, failed duplicate key error. Now here's the thing though, I'm not getting my actual message that I had before. I wonder if the validation gets ignored. Well, actually, let's try two things just to make sure that we're not accidentally tripping something. Maybe the validator, if you return true, is technically false. Which just feels backwards to me, but it could be possible. Let's send. Nope, I have a funny feeling our restrictions are kicking in before any of the other things kick in. So we actually need to, if we're going to do this properly, we need to remove these unique and drop dupes. which kind of bothers me a little bit because that means we're not letting the database do what it does best. But for some reason, they throw their error before any of the other validation checks throw their error, which makes no real sense to me, actually, now that I think of it. And you see, it's still... Oh, because those collections have already got... Yeah, because the database has already been created with that index on it, you can't recreate the index piece. Alright, so this is kind of annoying, and I apologize for this, but we need to actually drop our database. So if we go to the Cloud Atlas, and we log in, save that in one password because it's kind of annoying to do it. We want to go to our collections and find that collection, which is called genres, and there's a little trash can beside it. If you click on the trash can, you have to type in genres, so it doesn't allow you to just delete it without typing that in. But there we go. So we've deleted that database. Now I'm hoping that connection will work properly. So if I create this, so I'll hit send. So it created the genre successfully. And if I hit send again, it's created successfully. What if I hit send again? Yeah. Okay, so our logic is slightly wrong on this. So I'm guessing that's what we want. Equals 0. Let's try that thing again and see if it actually worked. No, something's wrong with my validation altogether, and I'm not sure what it is. The validator function isn't actually triggering, unless this statement here is the problem. Let's just try console logging our value and see whether or not that's the issue. So if things are working, we should see the value spit out over on our side here. So it's definitely hitting the validation function because there's our value. I bet you dollars to donuts, it's this stupid line right here on line 11. I'm slowly remembering that this didn't originally work. Yeah, it's definitely that line. So it turns out that actually exists when you create. Let's get rid of that. Let's go back to does not equal 0, 0 or equal 0 because return true is obviously valid. Send. Send. Oh, I hate you. What the hell is this thing doing? I know for a fact the validator is actually triggering. There we go. Okay. So here's what I've learned. If it's 0, then return true. So if the validator returns true, it throws an error. Which feels a little bit reversed to me. Maybe no, that works out. Yeah, so if the validator returns true, it's an error. Hence why I originally had 0, like so. Because that would return the error. So we just want to return count, like so. Let's see if that works. It should trigger it. Yep. Validation error. Get a great big error message. All right. I will give you this entire genre schema because it has changed a little bit. There we go. Now, the unfortunate thing is we still have crap inside our database, and I now think that turning unique back on would have worked, and drop dupes would work. I think both of those are valid, and this won't trigger anymore. We can double check, though. Yep. It's doing it properly. Now, the drop dupes Should have gotten rid of stuff in our collection. Nope, it did not. See all those duplicates that we've got in there? That's pretty trashy. Let's go ahead and trash can our genres so that we can make our database pure again. There. And now if we attempt to create a drop dupes, we can create it the first time, and then the second time, it throws our custom validation problem. And it doesn't create it. So there we go. So what have we done so far? We've created a setter that actually modifies the value before we save it in the database, allowing us to be able to trim any white space that's not necessary, and then set the whole thing to lowercase. Cool. Then we created a custom validator, right, which is in here. The validator basically checks the database, says, hey, is there already a name in there with that name? If there is, then we return false. Or sorry, we return true. And if we return true, it means that validation has failed, and we throw this error message plus a bunch of other garbage. Otherwise, we bypass this and save the record to the database. Does that make sense? Did we all get there in the end? I think we did. Part of the problem with Mongoose, and one of the biggest things that I kind of object to, is that between versions, between version 4 and 5, they change drastically. Between version 3 and 4, they change drastically. They deprecate functions, and when they deprecate, they like deprecate, like just remove the function entirely instead of giving usually you get one major version and deprecation warnings. With Mongoose, they deprecate it and they remove it, and then there is no deprecation warnings in the next one. So it's a little bit frustrating. But overall, it is still one of the best ODMs that are out there. It is one of the most popular. And the reason why I teach it is because it's likely the one that you're going to encounter. So when you're out in the wild, you will likely encounter this particular ODM. Okay, so what's next? So we have index, show, create, update, and delete. We have a setter that actually normalizes and sanitizes our data, and we have a validator to avoid us winding up with duplicate entries going into our database. We are awesome. Now we need that child relationship that we were talking about before. Genres are our parent relationship, allowing us to be able to access different genres. The child relationship would be the movies that relate to those genres. So we want to create a child relationship where we have genres in place that correlate to our actual, movies in place that correlate to our genre. So we're going to start, obviously, by first clearing everything out. We're going to start with a new model, and we'll call it movies.js. So to create a model, we need to require Mongoose. Then we need to create our schema. So we'll call this movie schema. And it will be a new mongoose.schema. And then we'll need to export it. And we'll just call it movie. I mean, you can literally call it whatever you want, but it does make sense to call it movie. And movie schema. What is Mongoose? Mongoose is a ODM, stands for Object Data Mapper. Its whole purpose is to take your Mongo database, turn your documents into objects so that you can access them easily and read their contents, but then it also provides you with helpful methods for creating new documents in your Mongo collection. Makes working with Mongo databases much simpler. It also forces some constraints, like for example, our schemas force a blueprint of how our data is going to look, so it makes things a little bit cleaner. Forces data typing and stuff like that. All right, what fields, and I told you guys to think about this, what fields are we going to put inside our movie schema? I mean, besides the obvious ones like title. Title makes sense, right? What else? Yeah, length. I like length. So length is kind of a weird one because you'd almost want like the actual timestamp, like the total timestamp of length. So I'm not really sure what we're going to use for a data type. We might have to look that one up. Year. Year is a good one, right? That's easy too. That'll just be a number. Synopsis, rating. Yep, synopsis. That'll wind up being text. Rating, very good. That will actually create as an enum. And then the genre. Yeah, absolutely. So genre is going to be a little interesting because genre needs to connect to our other relationship, right? So we'll save that guy for last. We'll set up all the rest of it. We also want to make sure we have our timestamps in place. Thank you, tab 9, for being absolutely useless. There we go. We'll turn those on. So there's our timestamps turned on. So title. I mean, what data type is title going to be, obviously? It's going to be a string, right? That's super easy. And required, yeah, absolutely. Makes sense for it to be required. Length I'm going to have to look up. I'm not sure if we have a timestamp that we can create or if we would have to do it like a string. I'm not sure what we'll have to do. Let's take a look. Let's see. Mongoose data types. Let's see what schema types we have available to us. So we get string, number, date, buffer, Boolean, mixed, object ID, array, decimal 128, map, and schema. So we could store the length as a solid number, right? Just basically the seconds. So just store the entire seconds, and then when we pull it out, we can create a getter that actually converts it into a timestamp, or a setter that takes a timestamp and converts it into our length of seconds. I think that's the best bet. So why don't we make it type number? And what do you think? Should it be required? Or do you think it should be optional? Just nothing. Whatever. All right, let's make it required. Year. Let's do type and number. And we won't make it required. We'll just leave it as an optional. Same with synopsis, just because when you're testing this stuff, you kind of don't necessarily want to have to deal with, you know, massive typing out tons of data. However, we should, with schema, we can actually tell it to set a length. But I can never remember how. Mongoose set string length. No, that's not what I want. I'm not sure what the default string length is in Mongoose. Default string length. Maybe we'll just try it and we'll see. And if we hit a cap, then we hit a cap. Rating is going to be an enum. So that's kind of a weird setup too in Mongoose to actually get enums. What an enum is it's a selection of options. So you're only allowed these certain options as part of your enum. So what we do is we do type, and we'll make the type string, but then we only allow these options. So you could have G, right? PG, PG-13, A14, R, and I guess M would be our enum options. And then later on we can grab those enum options. There's this creepy little black spider running all over my desk. I'm freaking out he's going to land on me. Alright, and then genre. Genre needs to point to another model as a reference, right? So we want to make sure that we're pulling that particular model. Yes, rating type should be a string. Oh, string with a capital S. Yeah, you're right. There we go. Rating should be type string with a capital S. And then this one's a little bit different. This data type is kind of odd. It's schema dot types dot object ID, and then you create a reference, and the reference points to the name of the model, not the schema name, right? So the name of our model is user, or no, it's not. It's genre with a capital G. No, I didn't mean to do string. I meant to do string with a capital S. Yep. Alright, so lots of different things. Obviously, we could add validations in here as well. But for now, we'll just keep it nice and simple. The time, the length, is going to be the weirdest one. It's going to be the weirdest one to deal with because we're really looking for seconds. So what we could do is we could create a setter that takes that pattern of seconds and converts it into hours, minutes, and seconds by just doing the calculations for it. Or we can make our lives easier and just make it a string. You know what? Let's just make it a string. Let's make length a string just for argument's sake, just to make life simple. Just because I don't feel like doing all that stuff. If we think about it, we can come back to it and change it. I want to get our connections all together, because we still need to write a bunch of controllers. Alright. I think I actually have to paste bin this one, because it's just slightly a little too big for the chat channel. Oh, darn it. Don't you hate it when you go to paste and you accidentally hit Control C instead of V? So you wind up copying again. All you can think of is, damn you! Yep, same. My keyboard, I have like a nice keyboard with these like circular keys. They're not square, they're all circles. And I've noticed I do it way more on this keyboard than I've ever done it ever. Because of the circular keys. Alright, so we are now ready to write our controller. Obviously we need to create it because we don't have one. So we'll do a new file and we'll just call it movies. And then step one, we'll just pull in the controller, the model right away, because we're going to need it anyways, right? Because we're automatically going to be using it. So I'm going to do const movie equals require models / movie. So, no, movie. There we go. We're going to wind up with the same 5 actions that we wound up in the last one. So we can just stub them all out in one go. So what I would do is I would go in exports.index like so. I would copy them 5 times by hitting Alt-Shift down. I would do show. I would do create, update, delete. Oh no, sorry, destroy. Then hitting Alt and Control and pressing up, I can create multiple cursors, like so. So that was Alt, Control, up. And now I can go ahead and write out all my function calls all in one go. So these are all going to be async operations. Request, response, next. There we go. Write all my try catches at the same time, because they're all the same anyways. Oh, that would be a little trickier to do. I was going to try to create a split, but I can't remember how to do it. I mean, this is still pretty stellar either way. There. We have all of our actions ready to go. Our index is literally just going to be pulling the genres, right? Super simple. Just exactly the same as what we wrote basically before. So it's const genres equals await movie dot find, right? And then our very simple response. So it's response dot status of 200. We can even write JSON right here with genres. Oh, yeah, sorry. Batting 1,000. That should be movies, not genres. I'm in and out of code all day long. Like, this is the problem. I've been up since 5, right? Writing code. And then I spend 6 hours in the evening writing code. So by the time my day's done, pardon my French, but I don't want to see one more line of effing code. Yeah. It's funny because when I was younger, I loved programming so much, I would do it literally for way longer than I should. Like 16, 17 hours in a day was not unusual to do code. Now I'm like, hence why I changed roles. I'm a technical project manager now, so it's a bit different. Like I do a lot of investigation, but I don't write a ton of code, which is good. I kind of like it. Gives me a bit of a break. I still write code, I just don't write as much. Alright, so in this one we're going to grab our ID from the body, right? So equals request dot params, right? And then we'll just assign our things. So it'll be const movie equals await movie dot find by ID, and just shove the ID in there. And then response dot status of 200 with the JSON returning the movie. So that's 2 actions now. As you'll notice, these actions don't change very much from action to action. Basically, the code is the same, right? And arguably, you could make this more class-based. So you could write a base class for this whole thing and just inherit these 5 actions and just abstract them enough that you can write them all that way. I mean, I don't see that very often in these types of systems. Usually these are written out all the time, but you could do that. Especially if they're never going to change. All right, so for our create, it gets a little bit fatter than these do. So I'll give you these two just because they're there. And then we can fill out the create, which is a little chunkier than these guys are. All right, so for the create, we're going to have a nice big object full of things, right? So we'll show that into the request.body. And then the items are, and I'm not going to remember, so I will split my screen and put the model over here so I can look at it. So we need title, length, year, not writing show, synopsis, rating, and genre. So they're going to need to pass their genre, but they're going to need to pass the ID of the genre they want to connect to. We could make that a little easier to do that. And we might. So next, we just want to create our thing, right? So we'll do const movie equals await movie dot create, and it's going to take that massive object. And the reason why we're doing this is it's called, what's it called? It's not parameter filtering. It's like parameter filtering. Is it parameter constraints or constraining parameters? I forget what the terminology is, but basically we're forcing only these parameters that we're going to actually look at. We are not going to allow for other parameters that they shove into the request body. We're not just going to pull them. We're only going to pull the ones we want. Yeah, we already talked about that, but we're not doing it that way. We talked about that last week. Yeah. I did mention that. It's funny that you say that because, so you guys have had Rich, right? Rich Freeman before for a class? Yeah, so I was in Rich's class and we were doing relational databases. He was the teacher. And I was doing relational databases and he got us to create basically a musical playlist, right? And so when I created it, I just dumped my entire iTunes library, went through it, and iTunes actually supports multiple genres being associated with a CD, right? So it would pull the music, it would pull the genres, it would create the correlations through pivot tables, and I built out this great big relational database in that. And then he deducted 10% because he said, it wasn't genres that he had an issue with, it was multiple artists that he had an issue with. He's like, only one artist can correlate to one disc, right? So one disc can correlate to one artist, not multiple artists. And so I had to fight him on it. Not physically, but I had to argue him on it. I did get the marks back. Yeah, I absolutely did. Because at the end of the day, it's stupid. iTunes does that automatically too. It automatically connected all these multiple artists. So I had to do very little work to make it work. But, I mean, if Apple says they can have multiple artists, then I'm going by what Apple says. Not that I'm an Apple fanboy by any means. Alright, so const movie, await movie.create. Now we just need to add all these things in here. Just like literally again. So I'm just going to copy them and paste them in place. And like I said, you might be like, well, why are we doing this twice? And again, because this creates strong params, which means these are literal params that we want. We're basically filtering them, right? So that we get the exact parameters we want. So yeah, it does seem redundant, but it's necessary. And then once we have our movie, we can go ahead and create our response. .status of 200. .json. And of course, I completely forget how we did it in genres, even though it was just literally minutes ago. Right, we have a message. So the movie was created successfully. The status will be success. And then we'll pass the movie back. And I wrote genre again. Why did I? Oh, yeah, no, I meant it that time. I meant it that time. Alright, let me copy this gigantic monstrosity for you. There you go. So that's going to create our new movie, right? And associate it with a genre. But like I said, the only thing that's a downfall is genre is forcibly an object ID, which can be a bit of a problem because what happens if they pass us, say, a string, right? They don't know and it makes sense. They don't know what the genre ID is. So they pass us a string called drama instead. How do we make that correlation, right? Like, how do we create that connection between those two pieces of data? So the one way we could do it is we could write a function inside here that takes that string, that drama string, finds the most closely related genre that matches, and then assign its object ID. Is the way we could do it. I might save that for next week instead of just filling this week full of so many complicated ideas. We'll leave it as simple as just getting the ID for now. I kind of wonder if you could actually... So like we're doing schema types object ID here. I wonder if you need to do that. I wonder if we could say that this is a string here. Create the connection using reference, and if it would actually create the connection. It wouldn't maintain the constraint though, I bet. I bet you that would be where the issue is. I'd like to try that at some point, but I'll do that on my own time. Alright, so update. Update is next. Update, same idea. You might as well even just come up here and do yourself a favor and copy the big body here and paste it into update because you're going to need it. Whoops. And then we're going to do the find one and update, right? So we're going to need the ID as well. So you need to add ID to that list. So we're adding the ID to this list. And then we will do an await movie dot find one and not delete, that's for sure. Update. It's going to take 2 arguments. Right? I don't know why it always shoves name in there, but we're going to copy this list. Stop doing things I'm not asking you to do. There we go. There. That took way more effort than it should have. We'll retrieve the movie back because once we've educated our users that that's what we're doing, then they're going to expect it for any resource they access. So we need to make sure that we're always repeating the same process, right? So find by ID, and just pass up the ID, right? So that way we're returning the movie that we just created. And then we'll do the response.status of 200. .json. And because we're super lazy programmers, let's just go up and grab this message from the create, paste it in here, and just say instead of movie was created, was updated successfully. All right. Let's copy all that message. And obviously delete, just like in here, is pretty small and easy to work with because we don't need all of that data. We just need the ID, and then off we go. Alright, let's do destroy, and then I'll just copy the whole model and or the whole controller, and put it in a paste bin. So once again, let's grab the ID, request.body. This we don't need to retrieve the record like we were talking about before. We don't need to return back that data, right? So we'll just do find one and delete. Sometimes tab 9 is good, and sometimes it's just jank. 200.json. And I'm going to steal this. Well, I don't need all of that. I'm just going to steal the 2 lines. Paste it in here and just say it was deleted. Oh, the other one I said was update successfully. It was updated successfully, as in past tense. And I'll create a paste bin for those of you that don't feel like typing all that out. I didn't notice that, but Pastebin has a new option, burn after read. So you can create a Pastebin, give it to somebody, and then it will terminate it once they've read it. So let's walk through what's happening here, just so we all kind of get a general idea. So index is going to retrieve all the movies, no different than what we did before, right? Exactly the same process. It's returning all of the movies found, right? Show, same idea, grabs a movie based on the ID and returns it back. Create will create a movie with a title, length, year, synopsis, rating, and genre. Genre will need to be an ID of the actual genre. With that, we create with that information and then respond, also returning back the movie that we created. Update, same kind of process, except for now you need to make sure you pass an ID of the actual movie that you want to update. And then you're also going to need to remember to include the genre ID. So you got a few different pieces there that you're going to need, right? And then it goes ahead and updates it based on that identifier. And then we're going to go and find it again because this returns back the existing record before it's modified. This will give us the recently modified record, and then we return it back to them. And then destroy, I mean, it does exactly what it says in its name. Finds it by ID, seeks and destroys, and blows it up. So in order for us to test all of these endpoints, we obviously need to create routes. So in our routes file, we're going to add a new route set called movies.js. And right. To think about that for a second. So we'll do module.exports equals router, which will be our function, and then obviously we're going to return the router when we're done. We need to bring in all of our controller actions. So index, show, create, update, and delete. And we'll pull that from our controllers. Movies. Right. Let's destroy. Destroy! Then we can go ahead and define all of our routes, right? So router.get for the first one, which will be just /movies. And that will point to index. Then router.get /movies/ID, right, which will be our placeholder, and that will point to show. Router.post /movies will point to create. What is the next one? How do I point to update? What's the request method for us to point to update? Your router.put. Yeah, exactly, put. That will do our update. And then router.what? I want to delete now. So it's router dot, starts with a D. It's not destroy. Yeah, it's delete. Thanks for coming out, Leo. They all left you high and dry. There's our 5 routes all ready to go. Here we are, peeps. So now that we have our routes, we still have one problem. We're missing one last piece to this puzzle. So I've got resource routes, but what do I still need to do before these routes actually work? No guess? Need to go to this file down here. Yes, exactly. We need to add to this routes, otherwise we don't have that connection, right? They don't just exist automatically. Let's add movies in here. Oh, kablooey. Look at that. Can't find module models movie. Did I not call it movie? No, I called it movies like a numpty. That is movie. So it should be model movie. So if you called it model movies, make sure you fix it. Another crash. Schema is not defined. Yep, I know why that is. So the reason why it's saying schema is not defined is because in here we haven't actually created schema yet. It's mongoose.schema. So right here on line 23 we need mongoose.schema. And then everything is fine. It's because most people extract schema so that they can just use it that way. Which, I mean, makes sense, right? But I didn't do that. We should have destructured schema. Would have made more sense. So it's mongoose.schema.types, and that goes underneath your movie model. All right, let's see if we can create something. So if I go to Hopscotch, I'm going to change this to movies, right? But before I do that, I want to make sure I grab some things. So this, I want to make sure I use this genre. And what are we going to create? Let's do, don't even know. Let's do genres first, and I'll grab the get for it. Oh, we only have one. All right, so let's do that. So it's emo punk pop fun. I don't know a movie that falls into that genre, but we'll figure one out. All right, so this name can't be here anymore. We need title now, right? Emo punk pop fun. I mean, let's just do The Crow. It's close enough. One of my favoriteest movies ever. All right, so we're also going to need the length, right? And the length we already said, you know, whatever. Hey, Google, how long was The Crow? She's thinking about it. Or she's died, which is also possible. I could probably Google this faster than she can Google.
The running time of The Crow is 1 hour and 42 minutes.
Oh, she beat me to it. There you go. Okay, so it's 1 hour. So we write it like this: 1 hour, 42, 00. So we just try to treat it like hour, minute. I would do 01 actually. 01, 42, 00. And then eventually we'll create something to parse that. All right, what else do we have? We have the synopsis. And I'll just go grab that actually from the World Wide Web. It's a man brutally murdered, avenged on Halloween. What else did we have? Rating? Remember, rating has to be one of the enum values. Like the actual enum values. So it's a good idea to just kind of keep that in mind when you're doing this. So we have G, PG, PG-13, A14, R, and M. And it is rated, according to IMDb, as R. So let's go do R. are. What are we forgetting? We have title, genre, length, synopsis, and rating. Title, length, year. I'm forgetting year. No, we changed it. Remember? We changed it to a string. Maybe you missed that. Yeah, it was number. Now it's a string. Alright. And what was it? We have title, genre, length, synopsis, year. 19 something, right? 1996. Definitely not what I just wrote. 96. There we go. So I have 6 fields. Is it actually 6 fields? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, 6 fields. I have my doubts this is going to work. I don't know. Anytime I find that I'm working with a lot of data all at once, I feel like it just does not work the way I expect it to. Okay, so we're posting to our movie endpoint. Should be movies. Sorry. We're posting to the localhost colon 4000 movies endpoint. A title, a genre, right? The genre should be the object ID of whatever our genre is. Our length, our synopsis, our rating, and our year. Remember, the rating is an enum, so it has to be one of the values that we chose. If we don't choose the right value, then it blows up. Incidentally, movies should also drop duplicates, so you can't add multiple movies, but if we click send, oh, it was created successfully. There we go. Has the genre ID connected to it. Everything is there. We have all of the data. All right. That's fine and dandy, but what we don't have is a connection from the genre to the thing so that we can see that, right? We want to kind of see the movies by genre. That would be pretty cool. So why don't we create another method inside our movies controller that allows us to pull all the genres and everything connected to it all in one go. Sound like a plan? I need to pull open Mongoose's populate because I forget what it is and how to do it. Right, it's like literally the word populate. Alright, so I'm not sure where to add this. I think I'm going to add it, I'm going to like collapse all these guys. And I'm going to add it up here just after show. So we'll add it in the middle here, like so. So I'm going to do exports dot this is a weird one to write actually. Show could do by genre. Not sure really what to say here. Async request, response, and next. Actually, you know what? Let's not do it that way. Let's just populate it automatically inside our genres controller and not in our movies controller. So if we go back to, if we hit Control P and we do a controllers and open up the genres controller, and we'll do it in there. So we won't do it in the index because you're pulling so much data back. I feel like that would be a bad place to do it, but we could do it in the show. So this is super simple. All we have to do is just tell it what field to populate. So we just do dot populate, like so. Oh, I can't do it that way. Right, because it's a reverse population. I can't do it that way. Because it can't populate the movies into itself. We need to go the other way. If I want to be able to populate the movies into genre, we would actually have to do a second query and pull them and then attach it. That would be the only way to do that. So the better way to do this would actually be do it through the movies and populate their genre with them. So that's not so bad. We can easily do that. Let's just go back to the controllers. I'll get my crap together here. And in here, we would do dot populate. And then we just give it the name that we want to populate, which is genre. Like so. Or sorry, it's in lowercase letters, so it'd be genre, like that. And it's not populated, it's populate. And I don't need this await, because I already have one. There. That's what it is. Jeez, I don't know why I added all the extra stuff. It's just stupid tab 9. It just adds so much extra garbage. I might disable it because it kind of annoys me. Alright, so this is going to find our movie for us, and then it's going to populate that movie with the genre associated with it in the genre field. So essentially what it does is it replaces that object ID that's there with the actual genre record, which is kind of cool. We could do it in index as well. Like, I mean, it's not difficult. You literally just add the same thing again, .populate. But it will slow down queries. So you just want to be aware of that. Everywhere you do this, you do stand a chance of slowing down your queries. All right, so now if we go to Hopscotch, and we come up here and do a get for the movies and hit send. So you'll see now it returns back our crow, but you'll notice that genre is now populated with the actual returned genre record, right? So that happens automatically for us. Pretty cool, eh? So you get that automatically. The only thing is, though, is to be honest, we would want the parent and then all of the children associated with the parent, so we kind of want the reverse. I wonder if it's easy to do that in Mongoose. Mongoose reverse populate. Oh, you can do a lookup aggregation. Which will actually return everything in reverse. But that's kind of goofy and a lot of extra stuff. Oh, it looks like people have created libraries for it called Mongoose Reverse Populate. But that's about it. There's no actual population in reverse. Alright, so we can actually add something called a static method to make that happen to our model, which makes it a little simpler for stuff like that. So I think I actually have an example of that. They're called query helpers. One second, let me just find a Mongoose query helper so I can make that work out for me. Queries. There we go. Query helpers. Alright, so query helpers are kind of an interesting thing. Basically what they do is they allow you to be able to create your own querying methods. So you know how we have find by ID and find and create and update and all those type of things? We can actually write our own query method that allows us to be able to retrieve data in a certain form and return it to them in the format that we want to. So the way that looks, if we go to genre, so models genre, we'll create a new query method in here, and I like to create them after the schema because it makes, well, one, you should anyways, but it just makes sense. So we're going to create a new query method. So we're going to call it genre schema dot query dot, and then the name of our query method, which will be all movies, I guess. Or we could just do movies. That also works. So it's a function. And then we return. And we need to bring in the movie's model. So it'd be, it's not this dot where, because that actually changes that. It would be mongoose dot model, the name of the model, which is movie, dot where. What? Since when is there a where method in this? I didn't know there was a where method, actually. That's interesting. That must be new. Where genre is equal to the object ID that we're currently working with. So that would be this dot genre, like so. That's a bit of a mess. And we're going to return all that. Oh, we did that. Actually, no, I'm going to use find here instead of that. There. We'll use find, because find makes more sense. So basically what's going to happen is I can call the query method and pull it. So, oh wait, I'm doing this slightly wrong. Oh, I don't want a query. I want a static method. I want a static method. Right. Sorry, I want a static method. So change query to static. Z with an S. There we go. So this is our method. The difference between a query method and a static method is a static method executes on the current values of a retrieved document. Okay, so a static method is on the current value of whatever document you returned, whereas a query method is on the whole schema. So it's like reaching out and doing the whole schema. Oh, maybe I've got that wrong. No, that's got to be right. Actually, it's weird because their examples look weird. Let's try it and see if it works. So it's genre schema.statics.movies. So we're going to need a new endpoint because we don't have this endpoint. So if we, in our controller, in our genres controller, we'll just do a, well, we can actually just grab the movies and pull it back with the genre itself. So we've got the genre here. So what we can do is do genre.movies equals await, and we'll do genre.movies. Or no, what do I want to do there? Yeah, we need to change the name of that thing. Let's call it Get Movies. There we go. So we don't wind up with a conflict. So in genre, let's call that Get Movies. There we go. So those two connect now. So this is a part of our show. So let's just make sure that actually works. It should populate a new field in here, and then we're passing that back. If everything is working, it might just blow up. I don't know. Let's try it. So genres, send. So we've got this one. So we'll grab that because it's in our show where our action's going to go. And send. No. Get movies is not a function, so I didn't do that right. Yeah, get movies is not a function. So what we need, what I'm looking for is basically the ability to call this on the current model that's executing. That's what I want to do. I don't want to find a new model, I just want to execute it on the existing record. Instance methods, that's what I want, instance methods. Which makes sense, because it's on the instance, right? So that makes perfect sense. Yeah, so movie.find, blah, blah, blah. Yep, that's right. So change it to methods. I'm sorry, guys. I really had this stuff all together. Let's try send. So we got the ID, we got the name, but we're not getting the actual instance methods attached to our record set. Let's console log that and make sure we're actually getting the values back. Oh, right, we need to call await here. That's probably why. Why is await being weird? That's weird. Am I missing a semicolon somewhere? That's really weird. I'm pretty sure it's, oh, because this isn't an async function. There. We need to make this an async function in the model, so that way this all returns properly, and this should be an await. There. Alright, so this is the genre schema that we're going to use in our models. That one there. And then in our controller, you're going to add this line, which will actually grab the movies and return them. And then in Hopscotch, hopefully that works. No, it's still not returning our movies. Oh, because I'm not grabbing genres. Yes, I am. I am confused. Let's try console logging that. Maybe it's just empty. Yeah, it's an empty array. So that's why it's not taking it, because whatever it's finding as the value here is not actually finding the correct value. So I have seen this happen before where you actually have to cast it. Which I'm not 100% sure on how to do. Cast to object ID. String to object ID. Yes. Okay, so you have to do... This instance method is turning into quite an ordeal here. So this is mongoose dot types dot object ID, like so. That casts it to the object ID, and then we should be able to get our record set back. I guess we'll see. Nope, still empty. Interesting. It's definitely associated, I know that. We can also actually just output what the current values are so that we can see what we're working with here. Maybe genre is getting remapped already, because remember how we did tell it to populate? It's possible that it's being mapped already. And if that's the case, that's even easier, because it's easier to grab what we need, but we just need to do it with the ID. Genre is not defined. Oh, this dot genre, Sean. Come on. What are you, new? It's undefined. Isn't that interesting? Oh my god. Literally kill me now. Does anybody know what I'm doing wrong? I'm in genre, right? And I'm trying to grab this underscore genre when I should be grabbing this dot underscore ID, because this is the genre, not the movie's genre. There we go. I bet you that's going to work now. Send. Damn it. It is returning the movie, though. I got it over here. We're just not actually getting it in the output, and I'm not quite sure why it doesn't want to return it into the output. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me that it's not. We are adding it to genre. The only thing I can think of is that it won't let me actually attach it, which I've seen this kind of weirdness before, where it wouldn't let me actually attach it to the record. So one way around that is to do this. We destructure genre itself. We store this in something called const movies, right, which allows us to grab the movies, or we could just destructure it in there, and then we just pass in movies as well. So essentially what we're doing is we're returning an object that automatically contains the destructured version of genre, and then we're passing movies. So let's see if that worked. Whatever happened there is not good. Oh, right, because it returns literally every single aspect of it. We would need to return the underscore doc and then movies. That's why. What a crazy amount of stuff just to get this one thing. There we go. It worked. Took forever, but it worked. All right, let me give you a show. Boom. Okay. So that's the whole class. We have now got associated records. We've done a reverse populate, which wasn't even a part of the course curriculum, but we did a reverse populate. We have populate working. So next week you might be like, okay, what are we doing now if all of our CRUD API part is done? Next week is algorithms for, not algorithms, authentication. So next week we're going to take a look at something called Passport, and we're going to implement Passport and make that work in order to basically create an authentication point where you can't actually create new records or anything like that unless you have a token. So we're going to do two-stage authentication, which is where one, you authenticate with your database, then that creates you a JWT, and then you use that JWT to create any request going forward after that. So we're going to do that next week. I do have the lab. What I will do is I didn't get a chance on the break to actually fix the lab so that it says the right things. I mean, it's going to take me like 5 minutes to fix it, so if you guys want to check that at 6 o'clock, as long as I'm not interrupted between now and 6, I will get that up and ready for you, and then you guys can do the lab. The lab essentially is just going to be a super simple CRUD API where you just basically create some endpoints, add one record to the Mongoose database, and then I query it from you. And that's basically it in a nutshell. Any questions? Yep. I'll send an announcement as soon as it's updated. Yeah, you want to use something called Doc API, I think it's called. Doc API? I think it's called Doc API. No. Or it's API Docs. Yeah, so there's like API Docs, which is pretty cool. We used it at Min 10. And it was decent, but it's not what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of the one that actually generates docs. Oh, what's it called? Node doc. Oh, what's it called? JS doc. That's what it's called. So what JS doc does is it basically creates docs from docs. So you comment on, like, you create a comment, for example. I'll show you kind of what I mean. So for show, you would have, I think I have it installed. Like that, creates a JS doc statement. So it wants to know your parameters that you have. So you have a request, a response, and next. So the things you need to put in here are the data types that it is, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I think you put the data type like it's like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I think you would say this is an object. I think that's how it goes. Like so. And then if you have a return, you put the return in, but it didn't detect a return. And then up here, you usually describe what the function does. So you can be like, returns, or responds, actually. Responds with genre based on ID.